think we've been talking about quite a lot of this in the last two sessions in any case, so instead of speaking 45 minutes, I'll try and make it half an hour instead. And it's obviously a question for discussion rather than one presentation. Well, what we've seen so far is the development, I would say, of 4 points of view, from possibly 4 forces on the crisis itself, within and outside, and in relation to the crisis. You've had basically the governments putting forward a particular policy which they've carried out to the degree that they've carried anything out, and you had an opposition which, unlike in previous times, is actually, at least is what they say, quite different. You also have, obviously, in addition to that, you have a liberal critique of the government policy, and you have a working class attitude, or a critique of it. So what we've witnessed is a semi-Keynesian approach to it, by pumping in large quantities of money, and under pressure taking over a series of firms, obviously banks, but it's been more than banks, as we know. And the pressure to actually nationalize is actually continuing. That's on the one side. On the other side, you've had the Republican Party and the Conservatives here objecting to what the government is doing, which really is quite amazing. You've also had an attitude, particularly in the United States, that the government ought not to have, the Bush government then, now the Obama government, ought not to have saved the banks. And you can just begin with that. It's the usual left nonsense, if one can say that. How on earth could you have not saved the banks? You could have put forward a demand for socialism. No banks, socialism. Fine. That's a demand. If you're not going to put it forward, well, what are you going to do? Accept no banks, no money, no activity, not full employment, but full-scale unemployment. That was the alternative. There was a real possibility of meltdown and chaos. So, where do you stand? You stand for socialism and changing the society. But what you couldn't do was stand and say, don't bail out the banks. You could have kept quiet, but stand up and say, don't bail out the banks, and then effectively have a front in the United States with the right-wing with Republicans makes no sense at all to me. But that's what actually happened, and there still is that kind of viewpoint existing there. And it's very hard to call it a genuine left-wing viewpoint, but it's certainly held amongst sections of the left, unfortunately. And as we know, the left in America is distinguished by its idiocy, by and large. Can't say very much else about it. Where the dominant left groups are Maoist or Stalinist, I mean directly Stalinist. So, it's kind of possibly what one might have expected. So, the idea, therefore, that the monetary system ought not to be saved, or ought not have gone, the government ought not have gone as far as the debt and so forth, simply linked up with the right. What was interesting was that the right did take that viewpoint. Obviously, Bush couldn't and didn't. But there was criticism to his right once, which then became the official Republican policy, which is very much there today. That very little ought to be done. The market is efficient. It will find its natural level, as it were, and if banks go under, that's what they want to do. They'll then be replaced by more efficient banks. The fact that you get large-scale unemployment is a positive thing too. It will discipline the working class. So one could go along with that. I mean, I could go along explaining, detailing this, but there is no need to. It's quite obvious where they stand. What was peculiar was that they were actually prepared to say, and are prepared to say, that very little ought to be done and there ought to be, in effect, mass unemployment. I don't think there's any doubt there is a definite shift to the right in the spectrum. That's to say, the right has moved to the right. I'll come back to that. The government policy, Freud characterizes as a policy of muddling through. That's true both in America and here. In neither case have they put in sufficient money to basically save the economy, develop the economy, pull out of the downturn, or whatever terms you want for it. They simply haven't done enough of it. Now that's been detailed to a considerable degree by liberal economists like Krugman and other Nobel Prize winners like Stiglitz. They made it quite clear that the attempt to save the economy or bring the economy out by the Obama administration, which is really only following on from what had already been done, what simply wasn't enough. Well, it's actually obvious if you look at the amounts, although they look fantastic, they just won't be enough to actually do the deed, and they aren't doing the deed. Obama has talked about large-scale infrastructure developments. Now, obviously, that would have an impact. However, an interesting comment on it is in the latest Scientific American, where they aren't commenting on the politics of it. They simply point out, without in any way criticizing it, that the proposal that they improve the public transport system by having trains which don't go 30 miles an hour isn't up to much, because now they're going to go, when they eventually get around to doing it, which they are doing, well, they'll then go 80 miles an hour. So you can only say that it's simply amazing, the idea that they have backward technology to be replaced by more backward technology. But that seems to be the policy. They're simply not prepared to put enough money to put down the tracks to have the kind of rapid trains that you have in Europe, but you don't have in Britain, of course. And of course, now, of course, in Britain, they're talking about it in 20 years' time, which really is irrelevant. But the point is that the grand schemes of having large-scale infrastructure developments, something like the Great Depression, or going beyond that, don't amount to very much. The defense of it has been that it takes time to actually get the thing going well, which seems to mean that you have to have more people drawing up plans to draw up plans and so on, so that you eventually get around to it in a year's time or 2 years' time. Well, that seems to be the overall proposal. So it doesn't look as if it's an ideal way of getting out of the present downturn. As argued yesterday, there clearly will be an upturn, although at the moment, in spite of the green shoots, they aren't actually getting out of it, even if they've passed the inflection point. And it isn't declining as fast as it was. So the point here is that the proposals and the action of the American government and the British government simply isn't enough. And they're well aware of it. They don't want to put any more in. It's not just a question of not understanding or whatever. They're just not prepared to go any further. Which again reflects the fear they have of full employment. Even if, as Tina points out, that in Germany, the Social Democrats are calling for full employment, which is truly surprising. So the third viewpoint which I've mentioned, that of the Nobel Prize winners, well, it's really those of liberals, is much more the classical Keynesian viewpoint.